Next, we need to learn about using property lists. You may want your app to store information that will be needed at a later time, or when the app runs again, such as user preference settings. For situations where you need to store small amounts of persistent data, say less than a few hundred kilobytes, a property list offers a uniform and convenient means of storing and organizing and accessing that data. Now, by persistent, I mean that the data is still there after the app quits and is available when the app starts up again. Property lists are used extensively by applications and other system software in Mac OS X and in iOS. For example, the Mac OS X Finder stores file and directory attributes in a property list, and iOS uses them for user defaults or preferences. You also get a property list editor with Xcode, which makes property list files, also known asplists, easy to create and maintain in your program. In fact, after you figure out how to work with property lists, it's actually easy, but like most things, getting there is half the fun. Property lists are perfect for storing small amounts of data that consist primarily of strings and numbers. What adds to their appeal is the ability to easily read them into your apps, or use or even modify them, and then write them back out again. That's because the frameworks in Cocoa provide a small set of objects with that behavior built in. By the way, the technical term for such objects is serializable, and we're not talking about breakfast cereal. A serializable object can convert itself into a stream of bytes so that it can be stored in a file and can then reconstitute itself into the object it once was when it was read back in. So yes, it's just like the transporter on Star Trek, and when Kirk says, "Beam me up, Scotty," it really happens right here with serializable objects. The objects are called property list objects, and you find two kinds of property list objects in the framework. Primitives, which is not a reflection on how civilized they are, but is a word that's used to describe the simplest kind of object. In other words, they are what they are. The primitive types are strings, numbers, binary, data, dates, and Boolean values. Containers, on the other hand, are a bit more expansive in that they can hold arrays and dictionaries, which are other containers, as well as primitives. And those are NSArray, NSMutableArray, NSDictionary, and NSMutableDictionary. One thing that differentiates property list object containers, such as NSArray and NSDictionary, besides their ability to hold other objects, is that they both have methods called write-to-file, which write the property list to a file, and a corresponding init-with-contents-of file, which initializes the object with the content of a file. So if you create an array or dictionary and fill it chock full of objects of the property list type, saving the array or dictionary to a file is simple. Just tell it to go save itself, or create an array or dictionary, and then tell it to initialize itself from a file. Remember, the containers can contain other containers as well as the primitive types. Thus, it is possible that you might have an array of dictionaries, and each dictionary might contain other arrays and dictionaries as well as primitive types. The Settings app uses a property list called root plist, found in the Settings bundle inside your app. The Settings app takes what you put in the property list and builds a settings section for your app in its list of app settings, such as here you see Bento, Classics, Facebook, Here Planet, iBooks, and so on. Those are settings sections that the Settings app built from the property lists, the root plists found in those apps. The Settings app also builds the views that display and enable the user to change the settings. So if you tap Bento or Classics or Facebook in the Settings app, you see a view that lets you disable or enable certain settings. So our goal here is to have My World appear in this settings list so that you can then change the falling words and the speed of the animation in the Settings app. So back in the My World sample app, we have to add a settings bundle to the project. And here's how we do it. First, we select the project name at the top of the Project Navigator list. Then we choose from the File menu, New File. The Choose a Template dialog appears with our last choice. Now what we want to do this time is choose a resource file. So we click Resource in the iOS section on the left, and we want to pick a settings bundle right here. And then we click Next. And then the Save dialog appears. And we really don't have to change the default name of settings.bundle because that's the correct name. We do have to make sure that it's going to be added to the target My World right here, and that's checked. And so we click Save, and the new item called settings.bundle is saved in our project. We can open up the settings bundle here. It's already open. We can close it and then open it if we want. And we can select root plist, which gives us our property list editor. Note that we also have an en.lproj folder, and that is used for dealing with localization issues, which is something we don't have time to go into right now. So in the editor area for the property list for root plist, we click the triangle next to preference items. Here are our preference items. It's an array in the property list designed to hold a set of dictionary nodes, each of which represents a single preference. And this is really why property lists are widely used in iPhone apps. It's because they provide an easy way to create structured data using named values for a number of object types. Property lists all have a single root node, which is a dictionary, which means it stores items using a key value pair, just as an NS dictionary does. All dictionary entries must have both a key and a value. In this dictionary, two keys exist: preference items and strings file name. This second entry is a string, the file name of a strings table used for localization, which I don't get into here. But the first entry, which is what we need for our preference settings, is preference items, an array of dictionaries, one dictionary for each preference. The user preferences in this case are the text entered by the user for following words and the animation speed selected on the slider by the user for speed. So here's how we get preference items to do that for us. First, we click item 0's disclosure triangle to see its contents. Remember, preference items is an array designed to hold a set of dictionary nodes, each of which represents a single preference. For each item listed in the array, the last row under it has a key of type right here. Every property list node in the preference items array must have an entry with this key, which identifies what kind of entry this is. The type value for item 0, which is group, tells Xcode to start a new group. The value for this key actually acts like a section heading for a table view. So what we want to do first is double-click to select the value next to title and type over it the title we want to appear in the settings app. So I use My World Settings. To clarify to the user what this item is, replace the title with something like Your App Setting. This is what the user will see when they run the settings app and select your app to change its setting. So they'll select My World in the settings app, and it'll say at the top, My World Settings. Now let's click item 1 and open it. The type value for item 1 down here is text field, which enables a new text field that a user can type into. Now what we want to do here is use the word phrase for the title of this preference setting. And that means the phrase to type for the following words. So we fill in here, phrase. So now the user knows what to type, the phrase for My World. And that sets up our text field preference. Now an identifier for type 1. Now we want to replace the default preference text for identifier with words of wisdom preference. This is the user preference for the text for following words, which the user can enter into a text field. And that sets up our text field for the words of wisdom phrase. We can select item 2, our toggle switch, when we're not going to use it. Item 2 is defined as a toggle switch, and we can modify it by changing its title value and so on. But because we're not using it for this app, we need to remove it from the file. So we can hold down Control and choose Cut. That removes the toggle switch preference from the property list. Of course, now the item numbers change after you cut one of them. So now this is item 2. By the way, if for some reason you cut the wrong item, you can always undo it and it comes back. You can also use Edit Cut instead of the control clicking. So now we open what was before item 3 and is now item 2, slider. This is our slider for the speed preference. We want to change identifier to speed preference. We want to change the default value of that to 10, and that represents the middle of the slider. Our maximum value for the slider would be 20, and our minimum value will actually make 1. So when you're done here, the root plist window should look just like what you see here. And we can save this property file by pressing Command S or choosing File, Save. Now that we've tackled the settings app, we will soon be able to use the preferences in the app. We're also going to change the settings in the flip side view. And wherever we change the settings, they will be stored so that, for example, if you change the settings in the app in the Flipside view and then later open up the settings app, the same settings will be there as well as in the Flipside view.